You are listening to the Hiking Radio Network, where we talk the walk with shows by hikers, about hikers, for everybody.
Mighty Blue on the Appalachian Trail, the ultimate midlife crisis. Join Steve and his guests every week as he staggers from Georgia to Maine.
Hey guys, thanks for coming back to the show. This is Mighty Blue, and the show is Mighty Blue on the Appalachian Trail, the ultimate midlife crisis. Funny enough, I may well be having yet another midlife crisis today, as my blood pressure appears to have shot up for no reason, and I'm seeing my doctor in about an hour and a half, so I'll move on quickly to make sure we get the show posted before I see her. Today, I'm back on with another section hiker. I know that Jester has the section hiker show, but probably because I edit and listen to her shows, I've become increasingly fascinated by our section hiking brothers and sisters. Today, we have a guest who recently summited Katahdin to end her 16-year pursuit of this trail. Sarah Ellison has such a great backstory, and I wanted her on my show. We'll hear from her shortly. Then, now back at home, Katie gives us a few thoughts about the end of her journey this year and one or two highlights. Katie will be on after Sarah. Then, in passing through, Winton Porter introduces us to a guy who was a trail social media phenomenon when there wasn't even a thing. We'll meet Minnesota Smith and we'll learn how one's perception of a person, especially on social media, can change over time. It is a fascinating chapter. But as I don't want to miss my deadline or the doctors, let's get on with it. Here is Sarah J. Ellison, or Sheepdog. So we've got another section hiker on the show today, but this one has achieved a goal in just a couple of months ago, I think, when she summited Mount Katahdin. This is Sarah Ellison, or Sheepdog. Great name, by the way. Hey, Sarah, how are you?
Just fine. How are you?
I'm good. I've got to ask, obviously, straight away, why on earth you're Sheepdog? It's not the kindest name, is it really?
Well, actually, it probably is. I was given that when I was in the Great Smoky Mountains doing that section. I was in ice water spring shelter, and a young thru-hiker was in there. And being a new section hiker, a new hiker to the Appalachian Trail, I didn't have a trail name. And so he asked me, of course, what my trail name was. And I said, I don't have one. He said, well, what do you do for a living? And I really didn't want to tell him at the time what I do for a living. And so I said, well, I train dogs and I have sheep. And he goes, so you're like a sheepdog then? And I was like, okay. Well, I'm a police officer and I have been for 28 years. The term sheepdog is often referred to as for police officers and for military. And
oh, really? Yes. I didn't know that. Oh, yes. Cool.
Yeah. So
that's cool.
So it was a bit ironic that he mentioned that. So yes, I've kept that name since. And
you wear it well. That's fine. You are now Sheepdog, which is great. Yeah. Now, this hike, we'll say we often don't have section hikers, but I've been really fascinated recently because I've noticed, funnily enough, in 2021, where we are now, quite a few people have finished their section hike this year. And yours started some time ago, didn't it? How long ago did yours actually start?
Actually, 15 years ago, quite a long time. So the very first documented hike that I took on the trail was the 11th of March, 2006. So Quite a long time ago.
And what do you mean by documenting it? What did you do? Did you keep journals, video?
I had a book. It was an Appalachian Trail mileage book at that time by a man named Wingfoot. And so I just wrote every time I made a section, then I would highlight it and I would put the dates next to it and just kept up with it that way.
Did you keep any comments in there as well? Like what sort of hike it was?
Probably not as many as I should have. I tried keeping a journal early on and it just did not work out well for me.
Well, it's so exhausting at the end of every day, isn't it? Really,
Yes.
you're just knackered from walking. You think to yourself, I just want to sleep or eat and sleep.
Yes, that was quite the case. Many of the days that I got into camp. Yeah.
In many ways, don't you think it's kind of sad when people don't keep a journal or keep a record? Because there must be days that you look back and think, oh, what happened that day? What happened there? Because I know when I even just listening back to my podcast sometimes when I look at my 2019 hike, it takes me back there so much. I actually remember incidents that I'm not even talking about, but I remember that day. So having some record, I think, is quite important generally, don't you?
Oh yeah, absolutely. This year, I did document my hike that I did this year on Facebook. I journaled it more and wish maybe Facebook was around from the very beginning and I had enough foresight to go ahead and document it the way I did. Because, of course, whenever I first started out, I didn't think I would ever hike the entire trail as it is. I wasn't sure where I was going with it at that point.
And how you found the trail was quite a fascinating story in itself. I know that you mentioned you're a police officer, but how did you actually find out that a trail existed? Because this, once again, is another fact that seems to blow my mind. I can't understand the number of people in this country who didn't know there was an Appalachian Trail sort of until they discovered it, because you thought, in my mind, I've known about the Appalachian Trail for years. Did you know about it, or do you know there was such a thing as a long-distance hike?
I definitely didn't know that it was a long distance hike. I didn't know anything about through hiking. I did know that, there were trails, and I'm sure that I'd heard about the Appalachian Trail, but didn't know anything about it. Didn't realize people walked that trail in succession for 4 to 6 months, or that there was section hiking. So like you said, I'm a police officer, and when I found out about it, I was a sheriff's deputy in Roan Mountain. I live in Tennessee. And I was out one night checking buildings, and in Roan Mountain, there's a little convenience store. And I saw something behind the building, and I went back there, and there was a little tent and a guy that obviously smelled like he hadn't taken a bath in quite a while, and he's cooking on this little stove. And I was like, what is this vagrant doing back here? But I was interested in what he was doing and talked to him for a few minutes, and he told me that he was a thru-hiker. And I was like, what? What is a thru-hiker? So he spent the greater part of 20 minutes explaining to me what he was doing and how he was doing it, and explaining to me about his tent and his stove, and it just fascinated me. So I decided I need to check this out, because I enjoy the outdoors, and had done some hiking, some day hiking, but...
And you being in Roan Mountain, You live very close to the trail, obviously. And one of my favourite parts of the trail is from Carver's Gap across to, is it 19E or 19 something? Yeah, I love that part there. So you must have lived pretty close to that, didn't you?
Yes, I live 35 minutes from Carver's Gap. And
perfect.
Like you, that is like my favorite section right there. Yes.
Yeah. So what did you do? Did you start reading it up, or how did the thought process take? Because when did you actually meet this guy? Was it actually in 2006 when you started?
No, it was probably the year prior to that. Probably,
right.
Let's see, he was a southbounder, so it probably would have been September or October even. Yeah, it was later in the year. And so after that, I started talking to some of my friends that were with the rescue squad, and I knew that they had done rescue missions in the area and stuff, and a conversation came up about it. And then I started doing some research, reading books, and it kind of blossomed from there. Yeah.
A 15-year journey.
Yes.
When you think about it, not many people spend 15 years doing one particular hobby year in, year out. And so was it, once you did start, was it always your intention to go the whole way? Or did you just think to yourself, I'm going to see how this goes, or you just said, I'm just going to go for a hike? How'd that work out?
Yeah. So whenever I first started out, obviously I had no intention of hiking the entire Appalachian Trail. but I saw there were quite a few miles here in our county, and went out with some of the guys that work for the rescue squad. Started hiking. We did like an overnight hike up there in Roan Mountain, across the balds, and
amazing spot. Yeah, amazing spot.
You can't beat it. And I always, whenever I have people here, I love to take them up there. It's beautiful. But yeah, I was that moment, it sparked in me that I would like to hike what's here, at least in my county. And then it grew from there. Then it was like, well, there's not much left in Tennessee, so I can do that part. Yeah.
So how did you manage that? Because if well, I know you've now done the whole thing. So did you go away then for longer sections because you had to travel to get to it? So you had more overnights?
Yes. Originally, it started out, I did the overnights that in a couple days that were just around here. And then from there, I went to Virginia, and I would do 3 days or whatever time I had off on my job. And then it just kind of grew from there. Once I saw that I had encroached into Virginia and into North Carolina, I was like, well, maybe I'm in this for the long haul after all.
Right. So quite early on then you thought, maybe I could do this whole thing. That was kind of started to be the plan, did it?
It did. So whenever I talked one of my friends into going up and doing the section from Harper's Ferry to Penmar Park, I went up there and we did that. And I was like, you know what, this is pretty far north. And I think my mindset at that point was, Maryland, it's a small section. I can kind of get that out of the way. And then I kind of made a deal with myself. I wasn't going to go any further north until I finished what was behind me. And so I started on Virginia, and of course, Virginia is huge, and it took
quarter of the trail, isn't it?
Yes.
It's a quarter of the trail. Yeah, amazing.
It took quite a long time, a few years, and I think in Virginia, probably my longest section was about 5.5, 6 days, and that was in the Shenandoahs.
And you told me when we spoke previously, you'd started 2006. Between I think 2006 and 2008, I think you said you were kind of a bit haphazard with it all. But then you got committed, and your mother passed away, I understand, in 2008, and you started seeing the trail as something different, or you saw it as a way to help you with your grief.
Yes, definitely. After she passed away, and she was a huge supporter. She always was fascinated about what I was doing when I was out there. And she was a good, she cheered me on. So, when she passed away, of course, my mom, our moms are just the center of the family. And I was the oldest child, so it was a lot my responsibility to kind of be strong for everyone else. But at the same time, I needed to deal with my grief. And I found when I was out on the trail and up on top of those mountaintops, that's where it all, kind of came forward. And I'd stand there on top of the mountain and talk to my mom. And it was very therapeutic for me.
And I've often thought about that, the therapeutic nature of a hike, and I'm not sure how any of us ever deal with grief sometimes. But so this had a clear impact upon you. You're up at the top of a mountain because you felt you could talk to your mother. That was an appropriate place to do it, was it?
Yes. And something that happened, I can remember distinctly the very first time that I had that moment where I was like, this is where I need to be to deal with this, is on top of these mountains, and be able to talk to God and talk to my mom about what I was feeling. And the very first time I was sitting on a rock and I was crying and I was talking to her, and a butterfly flew in and flew onto my hand. And
cool.
From that day forward, I always associated butterflies with my mom, and some of the greatest moments, including this last hike, I saw butterflies. The very
Wow.
first time that I saw clearly Mount Katahdin, when we were in the 100-mile wilderness looking across that lake, it was just the most surreal experience. A beautiful monarch butterfly out there in the middle of nowhere, to me, flew across that mountain.
Oh God!
And I was like,
wow.
But
that set you off, didn't it?
Yeah. Yes, it was very, very emotional. But
yeah,
happy.
That's a day for tears. Now I noticed you've done some of your hiking with a dog.
Yes.
Being Sheepdog. Did you start with a dog? I mean, how did that work out? Because I know you don't now.
Yeah. So the very first section that I did by myself was here in this county. And that was the section from Highway 91 back to Watauga Lake. And at the time, I was a canine handler. So I was a dog handler for 19 years, and I had a dog named Caber. And he went with me on the very first hike that I went on. After that, I didn't take him that much because it was further away. But just about, it's been about 8 years ago, I rescued a dog named Angus, and affectionately he's called Angus the Adventure Dog. He is,
of course he is.
Yes, he is an Australian Shepherd, and he just absolutely loves hiking. From the very moment I got him, and the first place I ever took him hiking was, of course, on the balds of Roan Mountain.
Of course.
And he did about 1,000 miles of the trail with me.
And now, as you know, when we were speaking before, I was taking notes, and I often, even though I'm typing them, my notes often don't make any sense to me. And but you said, when my note says, and I said, how different is your hiking with the dog? But I then say, you said that he was a hiker before.
Yeah, so
almost like he was reincarnated.
It was much. If I believed in reincarnation, absolutely, he had to have been a hiker before, because the moment I took him and got his pack, and we went and did our first overnight hike, his manners were so wonderful. His manners were great.
But you were a dog trainer. To be fair, you were a dog trainer.
Yes, but
so there's a good chance.
Yeah, I did nothing with him. It was all him. He was so. Whenever you would go to the top of a mountain, and he would always stay behind me. But if I was lagging a bit on an uphill, he would, of course, go around me, and I would get to the top of these mountains. And if there was a view, he would be standing there looking out. I have so many pictures of him and videos of him. Whenever I get up there, he's just looking, and he appreciates it, enjoys it. Yeah.
And is Angus the Adventure Dog still around?
He is, yes.
He doesn't hike with you anymore, though, does he?
I do take him on some day hikes. I stopped taking him on the Appalachian Trail whenever we were coming into Dalton, Massachusetts. He got with a porcupine, and got quite a few quills, and so he was off trail going to the bathroom, and we were standing there talking, and next thing I knew, I saw him running, and he was running after a porcupine that he bit down on. So I was, yes, it was not pleasant, but we were 2 miles from finishing that section that year, and so we scooped him up and got him to a vet and got him taken care of. But after that, I said, I'm so far north, I cannot take any more chances of him getting into porcupines.
No, damn right as well. So that's interesting. So how does your hike change? Because everybody says when they take their dog, it's the dog's hike they're doing. Then it became your hike because you weren't hiking with the dog. Did you lose some of the enjoyment from your hiking by not having a dog with you?
No, not really. It's a lot of work whenever you have a dog.
I'll bet.
The companionship is wonderful. It's a whole different hike whenever you have a dog versus when it's just you. So you're responsible for you and your happiness and how far you want to go that day and what you have to eat or what you drink. With a dog, they can't tell you, hey, I'm hungry, I'm thirsty, this is too many miles, or hey, I want to go further. So you have to constantly be monitoring their well-being and attend to it the best you can. So, and the gear, the food, everything that you carry is, of course, more. by having a dog with you.
And I suppose you, as a dog handler and a dog owner, and obviously a person who loves dogs, you must have seen people with dogs on the trail treating them not so well. Do you have any thoughts about dogs on the trail generally?
In general,
from what you've seen,
yes, I have run across a few hikers that have brought dogs out, and some of them I have encountered basically just got the dog a week prior and put a pack on it and got out there and hike your own hike. But if you're going to involve an animal, they need to be in some sort of shape, or how do you know that they're going to be okay out there? This is something they've probably never done. And so those dogs, I encountered 2 dogs while I was on the trail out there that same scenario had played out. They had just gotten the dog, threw a pack on it, and got out on trail, not really having as much knowledge as they probably could have to make it successful. And they were both in a position where they had to get off trail for a couple weeks, either to make a decision to allow the dog to heal and get back out, or send it home. So it takes a lot of experience. I
always worried about the dogs when I was out. I'm not a dog lover myself, and I don't have a dog, but I always worried about some of the dogs I saw out there. A lot of them didn't look happy to me at all, especially when they got their pack on again in the morning. It was almost as if they looked up and said, "We're going again."
Yes.
They have no idea, it's not over, do they?
Yeah.
And I know that you've had way more than your fair share of injuries, and you've had plenty of knee surgeries, I understand. How do you manage that? Because we actually had somebody on the show the other day, and they also had knee problems as well. How did you manage your knee surgery or your knee injuries?
Well, I've had a total of 7, 6 on my right, 1 on my left. And they were over the span of quite a few years, but still yet, it's a situation that you just have to have the drive and want to do this, and you have to overlook the pain and discomfort a lot of times. I took ibuprofen for a while and discovered I can just take Tylenol to manage the pain. Just try to keep my knees elevated or wear a compression sleeve on them.
Because I know you went this year for the final leg, and it was quite a long way. You went from Gorham, I think, was it Gorham?
Yes.
Somewhere around Gorham.
Yes.
Yeah. So you got a lot of miles to do before then. How were your knees this year when you did it?
Well, I was approved for a knee replacement 3 years ago. So, of course, my right knee especially is pretty bad. I mean, it's something you just you just have to go forward. And unfortunately, I did have a pretty bad fall in the saddlebacks, and I had some help getting off the saddlebacks. I hiked out, but I got some steroids to help manage the swelling. Rested for 3 days at the hostel of Maine, kept it iced, did some Epsom salt baths, and just the next day after I took 3 days off, I got out and did the Crockers, which is about an 8 or 9 mile section. Did a slack pack, a day hike, and ended up back at Hostel of Maine's just to make sure I was okay. And from there, I was good and just kept pressing on.
You're good to go.
Yeah.
Now, this next bit we weren't necessarily going to talk about, but you said you're okay to talk about it now. You tell me about a guy called Moose.
So about a year and a half ago, as I said, I'm a police officer, and I was involved in a case where a man named Moose was killed. And he hiked the Appalachian Trail in 2013. He was 32 whenever he passed away.
Oh, geez.
And his widow reached out to me. And, over the years, being a police officer for 28 years, you have seen and heard things you don't want to ever remember, but they're there. And this particular incident really brought a lot of things to the surface, and it was difficult for me to talk to anyone about it. And whenever his wife reached out to me, it was like a healing process began with her. She wanted me she knew about my hike with the Appalachian Trail and my journey to try to finish the trail. And
Sure.
she gave me his ashes for the last 2 years. I carried some to Franconia Ridge and spread them.
There's worse
there.
places to have your ashes spread than Franconia Ridge,
know,
aren't there? Really?
Yeah. She gave me. She sent to me his trail journal on certain sections that she thought would be interesting to me. So then, whenever this year came up and I was going to summit, she contacted me again and sent me more of his ashes, and I spread them on Katahdin this year.
How
Amazing.
awesome is that?
Yeah.
But that was it. But you've had a lot of tears on this trail for all sorts of different reasons, haven't you?
Yes. Some of it has been grief. Like I said, it's just such a magical place to be, is that trail. You hiked it, the people are
Sure.
magical, and the experiences. How can you explain any of it? But what are the chances of someone that I would encounter hiking the Appalachian Trail, and then a police officer investigates the crime being so associated with the Appalachian Trail? I don't think it's by chance. Nothing, in my opinion, has happened to me on this trail by chance. And the tears that I've shed while doing it have been for grief and also for happiness too.
In many ways, that is the proper definition of trail magic. Something magical happening for you, you and him, and the fact that you took his ashes up to Katahdin. I just think it's almost spine tingling, really. But was Katahdin always going to be the only finish point for you? Because once you filled everything in, you wanted to finish your whole trip at Katahdin. Was that important to you?
Yeah, it was. Katahdin seemed. Because my hike was sporadic in the beginning, and I didn't start in Georgia.
Sure.
And then once I did the Maryland section, and I said, I think I want to finish everything behind me before I start and go forward.
Yeah.
And yes, it was. Katahdin was always the end goal for me.
It's great, though, isn't it? And by the way, I meant to ask you this. I didn't write it down. I was thinking this. So you did everything south of you. You did Georgia from Amicalola Falls. Did you do the approach trail as well?
I did, yes.
Did you?
Did, yep.
Crazy, you don't need to do that.
I know, but I don't know. I thought, I'm here, I might as well do it.
That's right.
Yeah.
So tell us about that last section. You started in Gorham, and I particularly want to hear about your summit day. So how did that section go? Because that was probably one of your longest sections, wasn't it?
The section I did prior to that was also about 300 miles. I started in Dalton, Massachusetts.
Oh, right. Okay.
Forward, yeah. So up until that point, this may not have answered your question, but up until that point, I had been driving back and forth. And for those last two sections, I had saved enough leave time to be able to take a longer section. Needed to be worth my time and money. So
yeah, damn right.
Yeah. So we flew the last time, and I think I had told you I had a hiking partner before that I met in Pennsylvania, and so we flew up for the last section, and this one I flew up and started in Gorham and went north.
Was it their last section as well?
No. Her Jan, her trail name's Boo Boo. She had she had the responsibility of caring for her mother, and this year she wasn't able to go with me. So I kind of began the trail by myself and kind of ended it that way too.
Did you climb Katahdin by yourself?
I had started out from the Birches with another section hiker that was there, and we stayed together for the first mile or so. And then I stopped.
That's the easy mile, though, isn't it?
Yeah, it was.
Before it starts getting crazy.
Yes. And I have a fear of heights, so whenever we reached reaching that bouldering section, nothing was going to stop me at that point, though. Yeah, for sure.
Do you know what? I was just as shocked. It's the first moment you go above tree line. You just go straight up, don't you? I was just as shocked in 2019 as I was in 2014. I wasn't expecting it in 2019, yet I knew it was there.
Yeah.
It was kind of amazing. So how was that hike for you then? How was that climb for you?
Uh, when we began before the sun came up, I wanted as much time because I didn't know what it was going to be like. You know, I dreamt about this part for so long, and I kind of wanted to have as much time as I could up on Katahdin. And
Right.
we had picked a good day to summit, and it was beautiful. Got to the bouldering section, and I just kind of stopped, and I was like, wow, this is going to be a challenge because you
Yeah.
turn back and it's just beautiful.
Oh,
You're
it's
looking
awesome.
out at those beautiful lakes. It's like,
Yeah.
when you start seeing all those lakes, it's like mirrors just scattered along this valley. But got to work and started the bouldering section. Got to that rebar section, and I had to kind of stop. I sat down, took a big deep breath. There wasn't anybody around. I was like, how am I going to reach that? Because it's, I don't know, 7 or 8 feet above your head is what it seems. um, but a couple of people came through about that time, and they said, are you okay? And I said, yep, I'm just a little afraid of heights. And they said, you need help? I said, well, I want to watch you go up that so I can see how you do it first. And so after that point, I don't know, it was just like all my fear of heights kind of started to diminish at that moment.
Wow.
Once I got over that little dreaded section of rebar.
Don't tell me a butterfly landed on your hand.
No,
Really?
sure didn't. No,
Right.
I wish I could have said yes,
Yeah,
but
that would have been cool. That would have been
they
cool.
would have. Yeah, for
Yeah.
sure. But um, I just kind of took my time whenever I got to over the hardest part of the bouldering section, and you're looking at that part that goes up to the gateway.
Yeah.
It was just I stopped a lot and just kept looking back and thinking about how all those mountains I came across and the mountains you still couldn't see, that we had come across during that section. But
I think that's one of the really important things, and I didn't do it enough myself, to stop and think what's happening around you.
yeah,
You've got to be in that moment, haven't you? Because it's
yeah,
such a visceral time, to look around and see what the weather's like. Frankly, after my 6 months, I was kind of wanted to get and touch the sign, but it was a culmination of 15 years of effort. How different was your 15 years, do you think, than mine? Because mine was over in 6 months. Did this feel like a massive culmination for you when you touched the sign?
yeah, it did. When I got to the tablelands, it almost felt like my feet were in, I don't know, mud. I couldn't move fast. And it was
Yeah.
just like somebody was holding me back. And in that moment, I was just like, you know what? I've dreamt about this. I've dreamt about the day that I would walk across the tablelands and clearly see that sign. And I could look up there and I saw all those people on top of that sign standing
Yes.
there. And I was like,
Awesome.
that is, I'm going to be up there soon. So
Yeah.
yeah, I even, once I got on the tablelands, I stopped and I took a break and I got to thinking about that. I was like, when I started this, I was 15 years younger than I am now. And all the
Sure.
things that have happened to me, you know, uh, during those 15 years, relationships, the good things that have happened in my life, the changes in my career, just so many things flood back, and all the blood, sweat, and tears, and all the rain I walked through, and all the rocks that hurt your feet, but those beautiful views that you saw along the way. That's
Sure.
what I was thinking about the whole time. And after I got done sitting there for probably 10 or 15 minutes, I was like, you know what? And I looked up, and there wasn't anyone around the sign. And it was just
Wow.
like calling to me, say, hey, it's your turn. So I got to moving, and there wasn't anybody else on the sign whenever I got up there. And it was just, I thought, I thought that I would have been much more emotional prior to getting there.
Sure.
And the other thing that I was thinking about that I thought was interesting is, your day is 15, 20 miles a day or whatever towards the end. And I just have 5 miles between Birches and that sign.
That's right.
It just started going, too fast, I guess, at some point. But then, I had to brake on the tablelands. But when I got within 50 feet of that sign, it was like a floodgate. I started crying uncontrollably. I was just
quite right.
Yeah. And so I was looking back on some of the videos because I was videoing walking up, and I wasn't even conscious of what my screen was looking at. It's a whole lot of rocks. But I got up to the sign and I just fell on it and just cried and cried. And I thought, you know what? It's okay. I can do this because
damn right. You've earned it.
It's my moment. And so it was interesting because I had hiked around a lot of thru-hikers, especially that last 10 days or so. And so a lot of them were already up at the sign. And so whenever I got done with having my moment on the sign, I turned around and they were standing there and they just all started clapping because a lot of them already knew my story. And so it was, I was by myself, but I wasn't.
You were also with Moose, weren't you?
Yes.
So you could spread his ashes as well. So that must have been a pretty magical moment as well. Yeah. So what have your 15 years, was it worth it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Is it?
100%.
And what have you taken from it as a person? Is there a lesson you've learned out of life from the trail?
Gosh, I don't think I can pick one, but perseverance, I've always been kind of a strong person, but the perseverance that I learned from hiking this trail, I don't know, it just made me the strongest person I could possibly be in my life.
I bet all your friends think you're a badass woman, don't they? Now?
There's a few that think that, yes. Yeah.
Let them carry on thinking that. Happy days.
Yes, yeah.
Well, I tell you, you've got a great story, and I've loved talking to you about it. It's been, I normally just speak to thru-hikers, but you guys have you've got such a more varied story in many cases than thru-hikers. So I love that part of it as well. And thanks for telling us about Moose. Thank Moose's widow as well for telling us about Moose, because it's part of your story, and it's always going to be part of your story.
Yes.
And I really appreciate you coming on the show with us. Thanks very much indeed.
Thank you for having me.
Cheers then.
Cheers.
Bye.
Bye.
I know we all love to hear thru-hiker stories, but Sarah's was just as gripping to me and even had that additional element with Moose. I guess that when you go on this hike over an extended period of time, the changes in both your circumstances and your experiences are deeper and more gradual. The fact that Sarah was able to honour Moose in that way was particularly touching to me. Thanks go this week to our recurring donors Jessica Diaz, Michelle Brown, Melanie Swisher, Hugh Ickrath, Lars Hubbard and Kevin Eastman. Thanks to you all from the bottom of my heart. And if you would like to help produce our shows, why not head over to hikingradionetwork.com as they did and click on the donate button, and I'll be very grateful to you for doing that. Now, an overwhelmed Katie, a woman who is struggling with so many darn options in her life now that she's back home. Here she is. So, for the last time for 2021, we are speaking with Katie. Hey, Katie, how are you?
Hi, Steve. I'm doing all right, a little bit overwhelmed.
So, do you know why you're overwhelmed? Because when you're hiking, you had, we've said this before several times on different parts of the show, you have so few options. You either walk or you don't walk.
Exactly.
And now you're overwhelmed because you're now moving into a new home or moving back to home at least, aren't you?
Yes. Actually, the movers just left.
So
I'm
right.
in this apartment with boxes and furniture and looking. No, yeah.
So how does it actually feel now that you don't get up every morning and think, okay, I'm going to walk 15 miles today, whatever it's going to be? How does it feel to be in a bed and feeling, you don't have to do anything?
There's really and honestly, it's kind of a mixed bag. I'm glad to see my family, but my body is expecting to do 10 to 15 miles.
And is expecting food as well.
Right. And I'm still hungry, but I think overwhelmed. My body and my metabolism is ready to go, and then you're, just trying to, figure out your day, and yeah. So
life is so much simpler away from real life, isn't it?
It is. We say hiking, doing a long distance hike is emotionally challenging.
Yeah.
And that's true. It's true. But there's something about the routine that is peaceful, and in that day you're going to be walking through peaceful forest.
Yes.
So,
but it's funny. You can get peace wherever you are, on or off the trail. But on the trail, you would kind of expect it. At home, when you get back, yes. you're just really not sure how to adapt it, because you didn't adapt immediately to the woods, did you? No one can ever switch themselves. Well, perhaps some people can, but few of us can actually get into the woods and feel immediately comfortable. This is the place to be. So I'm sure the reverse is true. Once you get off the trail, it isn't immediately comfortable. Yes. That you fit back into your old life.
Exactly. And one of the things, and I think I brought this to the trail with me, but as far as like something that was really enforced in the trail was that need to be mindful and live with gratitude and intention.
Yeah.
So I'm hoping that lesson that we enforced on the trail, and even when you got to parts of the trail that seemed to be the same over and over,
yes.
you're looking closely. And so that's what, these few days off the trail that I've been trying to do is to just pay attention and be grateful for what I have, and, just take each day
and be present, be in the moment. That's something that a lot of us. I mean, I've come back off the trail, obviously from a couple of years ago, but you lose that very quickly in some ways, and it's kind of a thing you have to catch yourself and say, no, I am here right now. Let me enjoy where I am right now.
Yeah, you have to. It's a skill, and you have to keep developing it.
That's right.
That's it.
So I've written down a few things that you can now reflect upon the year. So let's start with equipment, because all hikers are supposed to be gearheads anyway. What was your very favorite piece of equipment that you had on the trail?
I would say that it was my tent.
Oh, really?
I had the Z-Pack. Is it Z-Pack?
Yeah.
Duplex?
Duplex, yeah. That's all I had as well.
That thing could set up in, I would say, under 2 minutes.
Yeah.
So if
wow,
a storm was coming,
you did well.
Yeah, well, after a while, it's like boom, boom, boom. There it is.
Yeah, true. Yeah.
So that was, I would say that really was, because I looked forward every day to when the end of the day would come. I'd have my sweet little tent, and it would be like home. I put everything, I had it organized inside, just like my, the same every night.
It's surprising.
What worked for me.
Exactly. It's surprising how comfortable and how familiar you become with your tent, isn't it? Things have to be in the same place, all the time. Even with a headlamp,
Exactly.
I could have found most stuff in my tent most nights by just reaching out for it. I'd know where it was, even if I woke up sort of groggy. And there's this thing of being secure in your tent, even though you're not really, that really you just got the thinnest piece of material between you and the outside, and yet you felt secure, didn't you, once you were zipped in there?
Yes, very much so. So I love my tent.
So what didn't work, or did you actually get rid of anything which, in terms of equipment, that just didn't work?
As far as my equipment, I felt like I did well in my research. Everyone had talked about bringing camp shoes, and so I stressed out over what camp shoes am I going to bring. And I started out with a pair of flip-flops that were some that I had worn a long time. They were not just the basic, but they had a high arch. I got rid of them. Because by the time I got to camp, I wasn't strolling around camp visiting with everybody. I was setting up my tent, having dinner, and, going to bed.
Getting into bed. Wow.
So I did not need, I think camp shoes are highly overrated.
There you go. So that's, you know what not to take next year then. And what about the trail itself in terms of, because you've now done, I think, just over 1,700 miles since you got to Damascus. To Damascus.
Yeah.
And by the way, let's step back from those questions. I want to say, what was that last couple of few days? Did you continue with that good vibe that you were having on the way to Damascus? Because the last time we spoke, you really were having great weather. And you said it looked like it was going to hold for the rest of the week till you got to Damascus. Did it?
Right. It did. I had one day that only for part of the day it was a misty rain, and then it cleared up in the afternoon. But I just felt like those trails were just beautiful. I loved going over the balls and that section is really gorgeous. I mean, you could see ridges, like layers and layers of ridges in the distance, and it was for the most part, a very rewarding section because you would work, but then you would have such stunning views.
So you walked into Damascus, you walked through the path, and then you came to, was the end the brown sign? Is that where you're going to start next time?
I actually walked all the way through town.
All right.
So so I stayed with Lady Di.
Oh, did you?
Bed and breakfast.
Lovely.
And yeah, she was very nice. I really enjoyed her, and kind of walked around through town, ate at the diner, and, so that was really nice. And so. Yeah,
so
went
Damascus
into some of the little shops.
Damascus is done then, but to me, Damascus is going underneath that brown sign. That is actually
right.
You're in Damascus there, so that's how it feels to me.
Exactly. Yes.
So looking back on all the different places you've been to in this year, in this 7.5 months or so, what was your favourite section on the trail?
Oh my gosh. Well, can you have a lot of favorites?
Of course you can. Yeah, of course you can. Yeah.
I would say the thing that has really stood out the most for me, as if I were talking about pure natural beauty, was Maine.
Yeah.
I felt like, Maine is so rugged and so wild, and even though you work so hard to hike it, it was just beautiful, just raw and beautiful, in my opinion.
But the rewards of that hard work to get up those mountains, they are so worth it once you get there, aren't they?
Yes. I still think about the Bigelows and how just beautiful moss-covered rocks and trees and beautiful views, and it was something out of a fairyland. Yeah. So that was.
I think the weather you go through these places makes a difference as well. I wasn't at all impressed by the presidential range when I first went, because I couldn't see it. I couldn't see it at all. But then second time, I saw it all, and it was just magnificent. So I loved that. Yes. So if Maine was your favourite section, and there must be places you think, well, I don't want to ever do that one again. What was the worst section for you, or the least favorite section for you?
Well, I hate to say this because I had so much trail magic and such sweet people I connected with in Pennsylvania.
All right.
But I would say, by the time I was in northern Pennsylvania, the rocks were really tearing me up. Yeah. It's not just your feet, but it's also the concentration, because you have to know where every step is. And, it was challenging. I would say the northern part of Pennsylvania was probably both emotionally the most difficult, because of the concentration needed to not fall and bust your
Yes,
head.
yes. Yeah.
You know?
Yeah,
Oh my gosh.
I failed on that on so many times. I failed so many times
Oh
in
my
Pennsylvania.
gosh.
But you know what? It's kind of a mini joke about it's Roxylvania and so on. But there are still lovely parts of Pennsylvania. In fact, even the tough parts of Pennsylvania, I always felt I'd really achieved something once I got through a day of it. So I don't want to I certainly don't want to diss Pennsylvania all the time, because
heck no.
it was a wonderful place to spend, and I wouldn't do without any of the trail. I would, if I did it again, it would always be, I would want to do everything. I'd still be looking forward to everything as well.
Yes,
and then you get to Pennsylvania
absolutely.
expecting it to be terrible, but really, it really is just northern Pennsylvania that's so tough. The rest of it's relatively straightforward, I thought.
Yeah, I have to say that some of my favorite hiking was also like in southern Pennsylvania, and the people I had the chance to hike with. And so I don't know, I can't, I don't want to really even say that there's one that I would not want to hike. It's just, I think that was emotionally challenging. By the time I hit the end, I was like, yahoo!
Yes, right. They're
Done
right.
with Pennsylvania.
So you made decisions along the trail, which is one of the things that make or break a hike. And you made good decisions and you made bad decisions. Let's start with your best decision. What was your best decision you made on the trail?
I think to hike it. I think to do it. I think to get up every morning and do it. I think to make the commitment to do it, to plan it, research my gear. I think those were good decisions. And I think to do it mindfully, I think that was a good decision. I think to approach it in a way that as a naturalist would, taking the time to really see where I'm hiking and what's the drama taking place in that forest at that time. Like in the summertime, it was all about predation and procreation among the insects. It was amazing. So yeah, I think that was the best active decision I made, was to do it mindfully, to do it with care and pay attention. So that's what I think.
So that was your best decision. You must know what your worst decision is then. What was your worst decision?
Yeah. I think I had a couple. One was really not taking to heart hike your own hike. I think that really that set me back. I think not hiking my own hike by wanting to, keep up with someone who I really, connected with and liked.
Sure.
And to this day, we still keep in touch and are good friends. But I think that when I stopped doing it, the way I needed to do it, that got me in trouble. So
it's a hard lesson to learn. It is a hard lesson to learn, I think.
And it's a lot easier to think it than to put it into practice.
Of course.
So like, the stress fracture took me off trail for 4 weeks and then another 3 weeks of low miles. So that put me really behind in the year, which impacted me, I think emotionally. By the time I was, had flipped several times,
sure.
I was burning out. And so, and then of course there's always, and I'll never forget it, the 20-hour day going over over the Wildcat.
Crazy.
I think that was another crazy decision, which goes back to hiking your own hike.
Yeah. Do you know what? At that time, though, if it didn't seem crazy to you at that time, that's kind of fair enough. But you knew you were kind of stuck, weren't you? You had to get down the mountain then. So it would have been a crazy 15-hour day, but it turned into a crazy 20-hour day because you had to get down the mountain.
Exactly.
Yeah. Geez.
Right. Yeah. Oh, and then I think once you asked me, well, were there any tears? Did you cry? Yeah. And I said, no, I didn't cry. I was too busy concentrating, and focusing on this step here, this step there, and getting myself off that mountain.
So you've come home for the rest of this year, and you are going to go back next year.
Yes, that's my goal.
And when you start out next year, have you got any idea yet?
I kind of think actually early in the year I'm hoping to do, and I have to come up with a firm plan, of course, but what I would like to do is even start in Virginia sometime in February, end of February, just start getting my legs again and,
cool.
Keeping myself fit, and that's close enough that I can make that happen.
So you've only been off trail though for a few days now, haven't you? So this may not be a fair question to ask you, but is there one? If there were just one takeaway you could take, and I'm sure you'll take many takeaways, what is the biggest takeaway for you that you've found from this 7.5 months on the trail?
I actually woke up last night thinking about that, and as you're processing what all this has meant, and I would just say this is that, the forest, the mountains, they're there. They're there, and all we have to do is go to them. And I really feel like people let their own fears step in the way, or their own what are their perceived responsibilities, their perceived life, and yet they yearn to be out there. And I would just say, do it. It may feel like you're being selfish, but do it, and it will strengthen you.
Well, you and I have come to that realization relatively later in life, isn't it? Haven't we? Rather, both in our 60s when we first did it. So I wonder what it's like for a 20-year-old to have that affirmation that they can do things they didn't think they could do. That must stand them in great stead, I would think, for the rest of their life, wouldn't you?
Oh, I would think so. At that age, I would think it would be totally life altering. At my age, I feel like I've done a lot of the work in life, and it was, an incredibly rich and all it can't be anything but life changing.
Yeah.
But if I were speaking to older women and older men, I would say, don't be afraid.
Yeah.
Do it. Yeah. Just do it. And
just do it. You could work for Nike. Just do it. That's the way you should do it.
There's always some reason not to. You can always come up with a reason, but, it starts with just, getting out there and finding trails near your house or green spaces and, getting out there. And I know a lot of women, and I say this because I've had conversations with these women who really are fearful. And that I think that's why you don't see so many older women out there. Sure. We've grown up in a culture that teaches women to be fearful.
Isn't that sad? That is sad.
It is sad. And I would just say that there were probably only 2 times of the times that I was out on the trail that I ever had a red flag, that I ever felt like, oh, wow, this doesn't feel right. And it was easily handled. And for the most part, the fears are in your head and your own imaginings, and you can address that, and you get stronger as you stay on the trail, as you do the hiking, and you realize how strong you really are.
Sure. Well, look, I'm now going to leave you back to your overwhelm because you've you got overwhelmed as you moved back in. But as I said to you, I want to follow this through to the end. So when you're ready to go next year, let me know a week before. We'll talk about any preparations and how you may have made changes, and then we'll just follow you again like we did this year and see how you get through the end. Okay.
Sounds great, Steve. Thanks a lot.
Okay, Katie. Speak to you soon then.
Okay. All right. Bye-bye.
Cheers. Bye. It can be overwhelming to try to reintegrate into your life. Both times, after my 2 thru hikes, it was a struggle to come to terms with this new life around me. I'm not sure if it was depression in my case, but I certainly felt overwhelmed, especially after the 2014 hike. But I'm sure she'll work it out, and we'll be looking forward to completing this journey sometime next year. As I said, I intend to be with her every step of the way. Just before we play out with Winton Porter's passing through and an extraordinary character, I wanted to let you all know that our newest show will be debuting soon. I'm not going to tell you anything about it yet, but I'll be having the host on this show in a couple of weeks to introduce the podcast to you. I hope that you'll give it a listen. I'll see you next week. Chapter 11, Minnesota Smith. It's time the truth be told. It can't hurt my creation. I, Matthewski, made Minnesota Smith. I breathed life into him like God did us. Without the Creator, there can be no created. I made Minnesota Smith out of a void to fill a need, a societal need. You needed a scapegoat to vent your destructive negativisms. Minnesota Smith came into being to achieve just such a venting. Lest the time-space continuum crap out now, more than ever, inventors like me will create such things. As the end draws nigh, beware y'all, the end surely cometh. M. Weinstone. Posted on www.whiteblaze.net. Whiteblaze.net is one of the most popular internet community discussion forums for the Appalachian Trail. For AT hikers, Whiteblaze is the equivalent of Facebook, Twitter or YouTube, a meeting place for staying in touch with friends or arguing with enemies, but also an instant generator of fads, scandals and small-time celebrities. One of the stars of Whiteblaze, a man who has stretched his fame beyond the usual 15 minutes, is Minnesota Smith. I have never seen a legend rise from the dust of this trail so quickly. When I first meet him, he declares that he's already famous. He greets me at the door. "Hi, my name is Luke. They call me Minnesota Smith," he says. You probably know me. I have over 3,500 postings on Whiteblaze. I see before me an orange kerchief, a hat, some glasses, a paunch, and a mess of tangled fabrics bent under an enormous overloaded pack. I can't tell where Minnesota Smith's voice is coming from. "Really? Wow," I say. "That is a lot of typing." I get a look at him as the outer layers come off. A pale, doughy man emerges like a newly hatched grub. Luke is in his early 40s. His head is as bald and shiny as a bowling ball on top, but shaggy with blonde hair at the sides and back. Large plastic-framed glasses with thick lenses hang lopsided on his pudgy face. A crust of sunscreen covers his nose and white gloves cover his hands. From his forward way of speaking and from the smirk on his face, it is clear that this man is intelligent, and yet socially graceless and satisfied with himself on both counts. In grade school, he would have been the kid who was always getting slammed against the locker. His voice is a low, slow monotone, and at times his sentences seem to lack all inflection, and they definitely lack punctuation. "Yes, it is a lot of typing," he says. "I want you to go through my pack. I don't know of anything that I could possibly get rid of at this point, but would like to see what you have to say. I've studied this for a long time, and I've read quite a lot on hiking the Appalachian Trail, and I've met some people who have actually done it before and talked to them, and they helped me a little. You come highly recommended from people on all the forums. I have a special diet and need certain foods and ointments. I'm quite sensitive to the sun, so I need a lot of protective clothes. Where do you want me to spread my stuff out? It's all down in the hostel. Can we do it down there? I have a 2-man tent. I know you're not going to like that. I made my own alcohol stove. I'll show it to you. Which alcohol stove do you like? Did you ever see?" The diatribe goes on and on. Eventually I lose track of what he's saying. My mind just shuts him out, as if he's an AM radio playing in the next room. Why is this man in front of me now? There is no opportunity to interrupt and no hope of a rescue. The rest of the staff, feeling that I'll try to hand Minnesota off, have all decided that they're busy with something that needs immediate attention. Buddy restocks candy bars. Nate goes to the shelf where we keep coffee mugs and turns them one at a time so that their handles all point in the same direction. Minnesota's next act is to commence a hacking noise at the back of his throat, as if all those lost periods and commas have been building up in his esophagus and are screaming to come out. I seize the opportunity to speak. I think an alcohol stove is a good choice for some people, but it's not. Well, which fuels do you use? Denatured heat? Or isopropyl alcohol? Denatured, of course, I say with certainty. That's good. Let me show you why. Give me that piece of paper. He pulls a pen from his shirt pocket and takes away my receipt from the morning beverage delivery. After diagramming the molecular structure of denatured, methanol and isopropyl alcohol, he cruises through a 10-minute chemistry lecture. He talks about which elements the various fuel alcohols have in common and finally finishes with, and anyone can see that it's the 2-part carbon that makes denatured a better fuel for cooking. I really should have listened more in class, I say. I ask him if he's a chemical engineer. No, I'm a geologist, he replies. For the past several years, I've worked on oil rigs, compiling subsurface reports that tell them where to stick the drill and when to change the damn thing. A broken drill bit would cost them upwards of $20,000 to $30,000. You see, I'm one of only the few working on oil rigs that holds 3 master's degrees in geosciences. What made you decide to hike the Appalachian Trail? Here at last he pauses, but just for a moment, frowning and swallowing, irritated at having been interrupted in the middle of rattling off his educational background. His answer is ready, but he has to change gears to call it up. I am looking for a wife, he says, and swivels his eyes from side to side, looking. Not just anyone will do. She can't be older than 27 because that is the best age for childbearing. Minnesota tells me he's heard of our shakedown service and he's looking forward to making use of it. He says he's looking forward to showing off his gear. Should be fun, I say. The shop's closing in about an hour, so we'll have to do this later. I'll meet you down in the hostel in about an hour and a half. Perfect. That would be good and give me time to organise my stuff, he says. You should have 4 drop boxes of food and water for me here. Where can I pick that up? Do you have any boot dryers in the hostel? No, we don't have boot dryers, and yes, I know exactly where your boxes are. I'll get them for you. So that's who he is, I think. He's the man who shipped 3 cases of water to himself in care of the store, each case containing 4 one-gallon jugs, and another 30 pounds of food. I was expecting him to show up with a mule. The stuff has all been sitting in the back room for more than a month. It takes 3 more hikers to get his payload down to the hostel. I carry my case quietly. I don't want to ask about the water for fear that a hydrology lesson will ensue. I'm no good at picking finishers, but the odds didn't look good. He's green for sure, and that's his smallest worry, but he is trying, and if there is anyone that a thru hike would do wonders for, it is this man. I hope he ends up on Katahdin, a new man. Neen. Posted on www.whiteblaze.net. The next hour moves slowly. The last hikers of the day are coming in from Gooch Gap Shelter, 14 miles away. Food and a warm place to sleep are their main concerns. Nate volunteers to close everything up and suggests that I go down and get started with Luke. Felicity is finishing a shakedown with a kid in the back. You sure? I say. Oh yeah, he says. Got you covered. Unless Felicity would rather. No, that's all right, Felicity shouts from the back. Still finishing up here. So I guess we'll just let you take care of the famous Minnesota Smith, Winton. Nate, where's Alpine? That reminds me, Nate says. He needs your help. He's on the porch with some woman and had a question for you. I'll check on him and head down to the hostel. See you in the morning. I walk out on the front porch and Alpine grabs me, beyond earshot of his customer. Hey boss, listen, this woman needs some tough love. She has a 40-degree flannel bag, all cotton clothing except for the 5 bras she's packing, one of those spring-loaded self-poppy-up tents. She says she bought it on the Home Shopping Network. Why is she out here? She said she wanted to lose some weight, get back in shape and hike into Maine was something that she always wanted to do. What's her name? She's going by Cozy. I look over Alpine's shoulder and see Cozy putting on lipstick while using her cell phone as a mirror. Cozy is a short, busty, heavy-bodied brunette, well-kept with a tender face. I guess late 20s. She's in unusually high spirits for someone so poorly equipped. When I walk over, she closes the cell phone and purses her lips to even out her lipstick. Cozy, Has Alpine managed to help you out a little? Yes, and thank you all so much, she says. I know that I want that tent, but I can't afford the sleeping bag right now. I could do some work around here if you like. Well, we are pretty well covered. I can do that too, she says with a winsome smile. Alpine and I turn to one another in an attempt to verify our interpretation. Cozy apparently is having trouble figuring out just who is whose customer here. Is there, by chance, a Waffle House around here? She asks. I tell her that the closest Waffle House is probably the one in Gainesville, a Georgia town best known for being on Lake Lanier, about an hour away. Why? Are you hungry? No, I used to work for Waffle House, and once you've been with the company for over a year, you could pick up any shift at any of their stores in the country. No kidding, Alpine says. Kind of like an exchange program. Yes, you wouldn't know if the one in Gainesville is near a truck stop. Alpine and I exchange another look. I ask her if that would really matter. She says, totally. I can make better tips if it's near a truck stop. Plus, if I can pull a few favours, I can get an extra couple of $100 in a night. Well, ma'am, we like to consider ourselves a full-service shop, Alpine says. You're in capable hands here, ma'am, I say. There isn't a person better trained than my friend Alpine here for helping someone get what they need. I have a hiker in the hostel that needs my help with a pack. Alpine hands Cozy the keys to his Rodeo, invites her to climb in and pick out a CD for the ride to Waffle House, and says he'll join her after a word with me. You want a free piece of advice, Sergeant Ingram? Just get her a ride to the Waffle House. I think you might be right, boss. You're thinking a couple of things. He grins. Actually, I'm sort of curious about this girl named Jennifer you hired that I keep hearing about. I hear she's cute. Stand down, Sergeant, I warn him. She's too smart for you. Plus, she has a boyfriend. His name is John. The fact is that it had crossed my mind the moment I heard that Alpine was headed back to the mountain that these two would be perfect for each other. We had known Jennifer Morse for a few years, but hired her only recently to work a few days a week. They wouldn't be able to miss each other for long. Jennifer is a young, beautiful, magnetic personality who says she loves everyone in a peace and joy 70s kind of way. She has a tremendous appetite for conversation. She'll start up a talk with anyone and hangs on to your every word as if yours were the most interesting tale she's ever heard. Her strength and her weakness is that she wants to be the saviour of all wounded birds. Her generosity of spirit, her willingness as a listener, and her natural curiosity have made her at times a victim of other people's sicknesses and needs. The needs of John, her on and off boyfriend, could be violently demanding. She isn't very happy with John. I let Alpine find that out for himself. John is handsome and slim, with long saddle brown hair, and he's strong, from wielding a hammer in a construction job for 8 hours a day. With his mouth closed, he exudes confidence and intelligence, but at heart he's a frightened, distrustful man. He takes out his pains and insecurities on Jennifer. We've heard him smashing windows, shoving her into walls, and once breaking her hand with a wild swing of a hammer. When I imagine Jennifer meeting Alpine, I imagine a romantic rescue. Master Sergeant Ingram could be her hero. How long has she been with John? Alpine asks. A while. You'll meet her soon enough, I say. So I guess things didn't work out with you and your wife. Remember her? No, they didn't work out. We ended up getting a divorce. Truth is, I'm done with women for a while. When he says this, I can see that he wants to believe it. After the divorce, I don't think I want to get involved. I just want to take it slow and enjoy life. Across the lot, the Rodeo starts up. Its lights come on, the stereo blares Leonard Skinner, and the horn honks twice. Time me, he says, just a ride to the Waffle House. I'm telling you. It turns out that Alpine does keep this promise. There's a man back there in the hostel who's looking for a wife on the trail, you know, I say. I heard he is carrying 6 litres of water and was arguing with other hikers when they told him he did not need 6 litres of water at a time. The guy is going to hurt himself. I calculated the odds 500 to 1. He will not make it. Neo. Posted on whiteblaze.net. Minnesota Smith has his gear lined up on a 20-foot stretch of floor along the north side of the hostel. The room is silent when I walk in, or rather, everybody is silent except Luke, aka Minnesota Smith, who is sitting on the couch behind his gear and declaiming from a legal-sized piece of paper what sounds like a prayer. Several hikers are standing in front of the gear, lined up like tourists who have paid admission to inspect some menagerie of oddities. I quietly close the door behind me, trying not to disturb the sacred moment. Luke goes on with the recitation in a raised voice, warbling with artificial emotion. This is the law of Yukon, that only the strong shall thrive. that surely the weak shall perish and only the fit survive. Dissolute, damned and despairful, crippled and palsied and slain, this is the will of the Yukon. Lo, how she makes it plain. And that, my friends, is the law of the Yukon, Luke concludes. He looks up and sees me standing next to the door. Winton, you missed it. I was just reading the words of the great Robert Service. I will get you a copy for the wall here in the hostel. The hikers love it when I read it. Actually, the hikers are exhausted and quiet. Many of them have slept right through the oration. I caught the tail end of it, and from what I heard, it sounded great. What was that one line? Crippled? Crippled and palsied and slain, he quotes approvingly. Great, really motivational, I say. Should we get started with the surgery? The hikers, who have lined up like tourists, step back from the gear, giving me full access to the equipment on the floor. I set the parameters with Luke so that he knows exactly what is going to happen over the next hour. Luke, I'm going to go through each one of these sections of gear: clothing, water, cooking, first aid, personal, miscellaneous, tent and sleep system. I'm going to pull things to the side you will not agree with. Please, let me just pull them aside, and if you want to sneak them back in later, then fine. If I know something that will work differently, then I will tell you about it. If you want to integrate my advice into your system, great. If you don't, you will not hurt my feelings. The goal is to make you lighter, more efficient and safe. Do you understand? Luke nods his head happily. He's got nothing to hide. In fact, he's ready to show it all off and teach me a thing or two about hiking. He's like a patient with plans to beat his doctor in an arm wrestling match. First, let's start with clothing. I don't care if MS is a hiking machine, he's still an idiot. HYOH, hike your own hike, MS, and thank goodness you can't keep me from hiking mine. Martyr. Posted on www.whiteblaze.net. Over the next hour and a half, we go through 75 pounds of gear. Beyond what a normal hiker would wear, Luke carries town clothes and sleep clothes, a date night shirt and a set of emergency never-get-wet clothes vacuum-sealed in plastic. His plans for wilderness courtship are very serious, and he knows he has to be fully prepared if he wants to find a mate under the 27-year age limit. He carries enough underwear to last 10 days. He has 1 gas stove and 2 alcohol stoves. He says that he is thinking of getting rid of one of the alcohol stoves, but is still trying to decide which one he likes better. His water system is more like a water treatment plant. Several Nalgene bottles, plastic water tanks, pantyhose, chlorine drops, gravity filter, pump filter, special filter straws. His fear of creek water is manic, and he is unwilling to part with anything that has to do with filtering water, with the exception of 1 Nalgene bottle, the smallest one. He has arranged to have several 100 gallons of water shipped to him along the trail in resupply boxes, but he's beginning to think, sadly, that he will have to abandon that plan because of the cost. His first aid and personal kit is chock full of razors, shaving cream, protective skin ointment and bacteria-fighting scrubs. He insists that it is no use for me to even go through it because he has already taken out a whole pound of stuff that he's going to send home. As for food, besides a typical collection of noodles and oatmeal, Luke carries cans of asparagus, corn, peaches, kidney beans and soup, and multiple bags of dried squid, seaweed, minnows and fruitcake. And he carries 9 rolls of toilet paper. Luke, why do you have 9 rolls of toilet paper and 2 rolls of paper towels? I know, he says, I should have taken out the cardboard rolls in the middle. How many rolls did you start with? I started with 16 rolls. I go through about a roll a day. Holy crap, that must be enough toilet paper to blanket every mile from here back to Springer. What is wrong with you, man? I eat a lot of fibre. It's the only way that I get enough nourishment along the trail. Well, that certainly helps to explain the few pounds of ointment you have in the first aid kit. I hope the future Mrs. Minnesota Smith is into Raisin Bran. I pull 4 rolls of toilet paper to the side, leaving him with 5 and tell him that it is only 4 days to the next town, so the extra roll is just for insurance. At long last, I tell him, I've done as much as I can do, Luke. The decisions are now up to you, but you may want to consider one last thing. What would that be? The grizzly spray that you're hiding behind your back. You could blind yourself. It's not for bears, it's for dogs, he says. I can't stand them. They shouldn't even be allowed on the trail. They can ruin the experience for me and everyone else. Luke, some people can ruin the experience for everybody else. A hiker named Stew Meat, who I thought was asleep in the corner, asleep with his dog tied up outside, says, "You spray my dog with that shit and you'll find yourself tied naked to a tree with your balls marinating in it. How's that for the law of goddamn Yukon?" Minnesota Smith reluctantly hands over the spray and I toss it into the small pile of stuff to send home. "Luke, it's late and I have an early day in the morning." I say, "I would love to hang out and talk with you more, but you have a lot to think about and I need some sleep. I'll see you in the morning." "What time do you open?" 8:30. "I'm going to take a 0, he says, meaning in hiker speak that he would have a non-hiking day. "My mum is coming up from Atlanta in the morning to bring me a few things. I want you to meet her." "Your mum?" "Yes, she is my support group for the trail." "What the hell else do you need?" "I'm running out of underwear. She's bringing another couple of pairs." "I'll be here for you, Luke. Get some sleep." The funny thing is that MS's best thread is when he was off the computer. The Wookiee, posted on www.whiteblaze.net. Now, I still can't help but think that beneath the exterior of this man lives a peaceful, happy soul, almost ready and planning, tomorrow, next month, next year, to get out. Minnesota's condescending attitude and his distrust of other people's ideas would have taken years to develop. The know-it-all attitude, the bullying nerdiness were what was left of a teenage defense mechanism. He was using his intelligence as a weapon against loneliness. Men like him need this trail for the healing it can give, and the trail needed him for the colour. After a few days, Luke moved through. During his stay, he managed to piss off most of the people here, women more than men. A few were intrigued, but others he just left confused. At one point, Alpine was ready to kick him out, and several people were refusing to stay in the hostel as long as he was there. I learned more about Minnesota Smith later on White Blaze, where a thread that followed Minnesota Smith's progress eventually became and remains one of the longest discussion topics in the near decade-long history of the website. Just as he had told me, he was a celebrity in that online community, where for a year prior to his hike he had aired his pointed views on every subject from birth control, child-rearing, and the role of women in society to energy policy, illegal immigration, and dog leashing laws. Occasionally, he wrote about hiking too, but his thoughts on that subject were no better received than the others. When the members of the cyber hiking community weren't deriding him as a sexist reactionary, they were complaining that his political views had no business anywhere on a site about hiking the Appalachian Trail. When he did write about hiking the Appalachian Trail, they jeered at him because he had never done it. He had an opinion on everything, and he could be provoked into 500 or more half-crazy words by anyone, anytime, on anything. He was the pet monster that every blog needs. When at last he set out on his thru hike, it was soon documented that he was doing everything wrong. He was too fat, he was too slow, he was carrying too much. White Blaze users formed betting pools, not only to wager against Minnesota Smith's reaching Katahdin, but even to lay odds on which part of his body, bad knee, bad ankle, bad skin, bad intestine, would give out first. For the first month or two of his trip, he was scorned and chastised on nearly every AT forum in existence. But while the bloggers babbled, Minnesota Smith kept walking, and with every step he earned respect. The thread that began as a betting book on his chances of failure eventually became the most remarkable fan club of its kind on the internet. A number of celebrated hikers, including Lone Wolf, Baltimore Jack, Tin Man, AWOL, and many others, used the thread to invite him into their homes. They fed him, gave him a place to sleep, and went back online to confirm his existence and describe their meetings with him. One dedicated White Blazer, Dances with Mice, was Minnesota Smith's beat reporter. Another, Matthew Matthewski Weinstone, was his poet laureate. While Dances with Mice kept the site refreshed with the most up-to-date information available on Minnesota's progress, Matthewski wrote short, cryptic odes to him in the style of Jack Kerouac. The thread filled up with encouragements of White Blazers who said they had disagreed with Minnesota Smith, argued with him, been insulted by him, or found him repulsive, and still did, and yet they wished him success on the trail. This whole weeks went by without an unkind word in cyberspace from Minnesota Smith. White Blazers began to wonder about the power of a thru hike to change a man's heart. And although the reports coming off the trail promised White Blazers that he was as obnoxious and bizarre as ever, he hiked all the way until the middle of April before he made another sharp-worded post to the site. That was when he warned someone not to call him Minnie. The last call I got from him during his hike was when he was in Hanover, New Hampshire, hanging out with Baltimore Jack. His plan was to skip north 140 miles to give himself a bigger window of time to make Katahdin before it closed on October the 15th. He will then flip back down, finish the party missed, and be done before the end of November. The next time I heard from him was through a package that arrived sometime before Christmas. Inside were 2 boot dryers, a framed copy of The Law of the Yukon, and a picture of him on top of Katahdin. A note scribbled on the back read, "Through completed. P.S. Drop the Osprey in favour of Gregory packs, please. Thanks. Minnesota Smith, Appalachian Trail thru-hike, atop of Mount Katahdin, Maine, reading Law of Yukon by Robert Service."